This is Glass City Humanist, a show about humanism, humanist values, by a humanist. Here is your host, Douglas Berger.
How can one sell humanism to the public without appropriating suspect tactics used by the religious who recruit to their groups? I talk about my experiences selling humanism over the years and how we can reach people and bring them to us. And finally, I give an update about a busing dispute involving religious school kids in a public school district.
Glass City Humanist is an outreach project of the secular humanists of Western Lake Erie, building community through compassion and reason for a better tomorrow.
As we close out the month of August 2022, just want to go back and reflect on some of the things that we did as a group, the Secular Humanists of Western Lake Erie. We had a couple of info booths. We set up a booth at the Maumee Summer Fair on August the 13th. And on August the 20th, we had a info booth at Toledo Pride. Toledo Pride always takes place in August. And so we had a booth at Promenade Park. Funny thing about the booth at Toledo Pride was that the weather didn't hold out. Thunderstorms started moving in, and we had elected to pack up before the storm hit full force. And as we're packing up our booth, we had taken the weights off the legs of the tent that we have, the pop-up tent, and a gust of wind almost took it. If it hadn't been for the booth next to us catching one of the legs, we probably would have lost our tent. And so that was kind of funny. I was telling my fiance, Sean, I said we were this close, little close to getting on the news, because they always like putting that stuff. But we did those booths, and I always enjoy doing that because basically it gives me an opportunity to sell the group to people who may not know we exist, or may not know that there's humanists in the Toledo area. They might not know anything about humanism. And so this is one way, since we aren't a church and we don't have large pockets and we don't have large donations, hint, hint, please send me donations, hint, hint. Since we don't have large donations, we can't do the typical advertising model, where you take out ads in the newspaper or on TV, or you do billboards. I would love to do a billboard, but we do not have the cash for that. So one of the ways that we can advertise the group is we set up these booths at these community festivals or community events. And so we elected to do the Summer Fair and Toledo Pride. And you have a selection of literature, and you try to put it up into a nice display. We have a tablecloth with our name on it, and it's got the old tagline, and because those are kind of expensive, so it's not like we can get new ones all the time. And then we have our banner up. At the Pride Festival, we had a pride flag. We put that up, and then basically what happens is people walk by, and they see our literature, or they see our display. One of the things that we used to lure people to the booth is we gave away toy dinosaurs to the kids. Little plastic, 1-inch size dinosaurs. Bought a bag of them off of Amazon and just put up a sign saying free, and kids would come up, and that would bring the parents, and then they would see it's humanism. We had a couple people come up, one woman in particular during Pride, and she said that she had no idea that Toledo had a humanist group. And that's on us, because, that's what we have to do, is we have to advertise the group and try to get people to see the group. And what that part is a group like ours, a social group like ours, we always have to be constantly trying to bring in new members. Especially if we want a sustainable group, something that's going to last for the years. You gotta keep bringing in new people. You have to try to retain the people that you have. That's a different effort, but you also have to sell it. You have to sell humanism. And then one of the things, and we're all familiar with it, is religious people do it all the time. Churches and religious organizations, they're selling their product, their beliefs all the time, sometimes in shady ways. I just saw the other day there's an ad for a movie that is a faith-based movie, and it's got some really funky hip music to it, and then at the end you find out that it's a religious movie. And then there's also this other campaign that's had many different TV commercials. It's called He Gets Us. And so what it will do is it will say, many of us are struggling with finances. And then in the next slide, and this isn't word for word. This is how I imagine it. Some of us are struggling with finances. Jesus was poor or something like that. And then it's like, He gets us. And so their tagline is, Jesus gets our lives because He was human too. So basically they've watered down religious belief and almost turned it into humanism, but focusing on Jesus. All right. And then, of course, we're also familiar with some of the mega churches, the ones that don't have any set, they're not attached to any particular belief system. They're not like Pentecostal or Presbyterian or they're just kind of a generic mega church. They meet in large buildings. And a lot of them have rock bands and flashy lights and they have presentation graphics during the sermon. And the thing is, to me, what the religious people are doing, to talk about an old saying, is putting lipstick on a pig. Because you still have this crappy belief system, but you're trying to dress it up to appeal to people today, because poll after poll after poll shows that people are not buying traditional religious beliefs. They don't want to go sit in a church for an hour or 2 hours and get preached at. They're trying to jazz it up, make it fun, and turn it into a spectacle. It's still a crappy belief system, but hey, it looks good. Of course, the thing where humanists kind of come in there is, we want to make our belief system into a spectacle and make it flashy, but we don't have a crappy belief system. We believe that our belief system is superior to religious belief. But we still have to appeal. We still have to use advertising methods. I studied advertising in college, and so I'm familiar with some of the techniques, but there's other ways of making, appealing to people and trying to make people excited, because that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to create a buzz. You're trying to make people excited. When we're having these info booths, it's not about hitting people over the head. Okay. What we're trying to do is we're trying to quickly introduce humanism. And one of the things that I use is I got some of those 10 commitment posters that the AHA is selling to different for groups or people, but the 10 commitments. And even though I hate the name 10 Commitments, I've said that before, I think that's a stupid name. These have been growing on me of late. And one of the things that as a chapter we got that they had available were these postcard-sized 10 commitments. So it had all the 10 commitments briefly listed on this postcard, and you could hand this out. So if somebody says, "Well, what do you believe?" You pick up this 10 commitment card and you say, "Here's our values in general," and so people can take that with them and consider it. So it's got everything that we want to talk about. And so that's what you're doing. You're trying to advertise humanism in general. You're trying to, for us as a group, we're trying to advertise our group. We want people to join our group, because you join our group, then we get more money, then we can do more programs, and then we can bring more people in. It's kind of like a treadmill a little bit. I get that. One of the things we want to do, though, with our info booth, and something that a lot of these community events have rules about, is we don't want to battle religious beliefs. All right. We don't want, it'd be easy to put up a sign, religious belief sucks, look at us. But that wouldn't be appropriate for a community event. The Pride Festival, in fact, they have a rule that you can't you have to be inclusive, and you have to be nice. You can't be talking about beating up people, stuff like that. You can't promote violence and things like that. They have a list of things that you have to do. So we can't really come out and claim that we're better than religion, even though we are, and that religion sucks. We could have a sign that says religion sucks, but we don't. And I think that's good, because that's not the only thing about humanism. It isn't just that it's better than religious belief. The reason why we're humanists is we want to have, and this is what we do, is when people come up to the booth and ask us, they go, what do you guys believe? Or what's humanism about? And basically, you just give them the boilerplate or the elevator pitch that humanism is a philosophy of life that says that humans can solve human problems without reliance on the supernatural, and that we support rational, evidence-based policies to address social justice issues. That's in a nutshell. That's what you tell people. That's the elevator pitch that we were using this month. And so that's what you give them. And then then you hand them literature. Like, we had a brochure for our group, and we had these 10 commitment cards, and we had the humanism and its aspirations, the little card, and it had Gloria Steinem on the other side as the Humanist of the Year. And we even had bookmarks with a quote from her, and she's from the Toledo area. She grew up in Toledo, and we point that out. And so what we do then is we introduce somebody to humanism if they've never heard of it. And then we have the people that have never heard of humanism, they know what humanism is, but they don't know us. So we introduce our group. And the main thing that we're trying to do is we have a sign-up sheet. Well, we want them to join the group. That's the ultimate goal, is to join the group, become dues-paying members of our group. That's the goal. So we're looking for people that want to help us build a community, because that's our ultimate goal, is to build a humanist community in Northwest Ohio, Southeast Michigan, that's going to be a safe place or safe space for humanists and other non-theists. That's our mission. Okay. So ultimately, we want people to sign up and become members. However, not everybody wants to make that commitment. So we have an email list where we send out information about our upcoming events. I usually do it about once a month. I also have a separate list that's, the email blast that I send once a month is all fancy and graphics, and you can read it on a website and things like that. And then I have another list. It's the same list of addresses where I can send people, like, we got to have a protest at this, and we send that out. And something that's time sensitive, we send that out. Like reminders for meetings, I send that out. So if they're not going to become members, we'd like them to sign up and give us their contact information. We have it available on the website, so people can go on the website and sign up. But sometimes if you have, and I just redid the sign-up forms, because the sign-up forms hadn't been revised since COVID started. And so we have, we ask for their name, their email address, a phone number. We ask them if we can text them. That's something new that we added recently, is permission to text them. Because a lot of people, see, here's the thing. One of the main points about running a group, a social group, is you got to keep up on the latest trends. And one of the trends is that a lot more people deal with text messaging than emails. So one of the things that we're doing is we added to our sign-up sheet is we ask for permission to text them. So it'll be me going, hey, we have a meeting coming up, and I text people. Then the last thing we ask for is their address, their mailing address. We had a picnic coming up on September 11th. I am sending out some postcards to remind people, hey, we got this picnic coming up. And those are probably going to go out in a week or two. And so if this is on a contact form and it's in our database, then I can send that person a postcard, or I can send them an envelope with a letter, things like that. So we do that. We get them on the contact form, and then most of the time when we're talking to people at our info booth, we don't get a contact information. They don't join, but they take the literature with them. And maybe later on they consider it. Or maybe they see us at another event and they go, hey, I checked them out before and I want to check them out more. So that's what we do. And so we don't battle religious beliefs at our info booths. I mean, that would be easy, but that's not what we do. We're trying to sell ourselves. We're trying to advertise the group. And the other reason why I don't like to battle religious beliefs is because it's not a battle of equals. Supernatural belief and anything that derives from that supernatural belief is not equal to rational ways of living. Believing that there's a second coming of Christ, and so we should be good, is not equal to we should be good because it's better for community if we all treat each other good. That would be a rational reason to behave, is you don't want to cause trouble in your community. All right. So one of the other things that we do when we're promoting humanism, and it's something personal to me, some humanists aren't like that. We have some religious humanists that definitely don't do this, but I try not to use religious terms or concepts. All right. We don't meet on Sunday. We don't sing hymns. I don't pass the collection plate. I call our group a community. I don't call it a congregation. I don't believe that it's an argument that we had with somebody some years ago, and it's kind of popping up again, is that there's some people who promote humanism that believe that there should be humanist congregations all over the country. First of all, there are quite a few humanist groups across the country already. They exist. And just because they're not called a congregation doesn't mean that they don't exist. So, but that's like an internal issue and not germane to this, what I'm talking about today. But I just get away from using religious terms and concepts. Because even though humanism, modern humanism, is a replacement for what people do with their religious beliefs, their way of life, their worldview, I don't see the good in doing that. So we don't do that. One of the things that I believe is that humanism is self-identifying. That means that I don't tell you you're a humanist. You look at what we believe and how we arrive at our beliefs and our conclusions. And then you decide, hey, I agree with that, or I am just like that. I am a humanist. It's self-identifying. One of the ways that we help people identify as humanists is to give concrete examples of humanism in action. It isn't about saying, hey, did you know that humanism believes in critical thinking? From the Ten Commitments. It's one thing to see them written out. It's the other part to give concrete examples. For example, the British Humanist Association, they did a series of videos with the actor Stephen Fry narrating that basically distilled in a couple of minutes different concepts of humanism. And they did one about how humanists think about the afterlife. We don't believe that exists. And they did another one about what is right and wrong. And so they give concrete examples of that. You can also give concrete examples like when we report news items and then we give our information about it. Later on in this episode, I talk about a bus plan dispute involving some Catholic families. And I wrote a letter to the editor about it. And so basically when I composed that letter, I used humanist concepts. And then, unfortunately, this will come up and I'll discuss this a little bit more detail in the next segment. I had signed it as president of the Secular Humanists of Western Lake Erie. Unfortunately, the newspaper elected not to put my title. But that's another item we can use to promote humanism. There's been some other things. One of the other things that I think sometimes hurts us as humanists is when we try to get too academic about it. It is a philosophy. Humanism is a philosophy. And some people like to talk about philosophy. They like to discuss philosophy, and they like to sit in rooms and do point, counterpoint, and give concrete examples and talk about it and smoke cigars and drink cognac or whatever I imagine people talk about. But I was on a webinar about the history. I don't know if it was about the history of humanism, but it was just humanism in general or something like that. And they talked about the history of humanism, and it was just dry. It wasn't exciting. It didn't make it seem exciting. It would just seem like a lecture. And so that's one of the things we try to get away from when we're doing meetings, is just straight lectures. Some people like that. So some people like academic discussions of humanism or church state issues, but we need to connect humanism to how people live today. For example, one of our recent meetings, we had one of our members who was part of the Aggie Fund, which funds abortions. And we talked about the abortion issue. After the meeting was just the day before Roe v. Wade was overturned, but we talked about the possibility that was going to happen and what we could do about it. So that's putting our humanism into action. Get that with social justice issues like Black Lives Matter. What can we do as humanists to promote Black Lives Matter or to support African Americans in this country? And so that's one of the things that we can do to help humanism appeal to other people who aren't, that aren't like college professors and sitting around smoking cigars and drinking cognac. Although I've never smoked a cigar, but I'm sure that that's what professors do. The other thing where we have a problem sometimes in humanism is families. Everybody's familiar with religion, with churches, and they have Sunday school for kids, and they have daycare for the little ones, while mom and dad sits in the sanctuary for the sermon. And then the younger kids have vacation Bible school in the summer, and then they have picnics and camping trips and stuff for families to do. And a lot of times that's what is missing. That's missing in our group. We don't have we have, that I know of, one member who has a family, who has a little child, and has come to meetings with that child. And so that's why a lot of people who support humanism and have families, that's why they join a UU church, because the Unitarians have that church model where they have, religious education for the kids and daycare for the little ones and things like that. And I think a group like the Secular Humanists of Western Lake Erie, where we're not a church, we kind of lose out on attracting more families. And it's kind of a catch-22, because you have to have activities and things for families to do to attract the families, but you have to have the families in order to make that work. And so we really have to find somebody, a family, to join us that is enthusiastic about starting family activities. One of the things that we're missing with the Secular Humanists of Western Lake Erie, which I admit we need to do better, is trying to attract families. And I think if you attract families, as churches know, if you attract families, usually you're going to sustain that group for many years, because you're going to have the kids grow up in the church and they're going to come to that church, even if they don't believe everything in that church, because mom and dad took us to that church. Or they're going to move away and go do their own thing. And then they're going to have kids and they're going to come back and they're going to say, let's go to this church because I went there as a kid, So that's why we need to try to attract families. And then finally, the other thing that I want to point out about humanist groups in general is we've got to keep moving and reach people where they are. That's why we try to maintain our social media channels. That's why we do the info booth. I have stuff with me all the time with a business card and stickers and stuff like that I can give out if I meet somebody and they say, "Oh, who are you?" And I'm a humanist, and you're a humanist, and you can give me all that stuff. So that's what we need to do. We need to evangelize humanism without evangelizing humanism. We need to sell humanism to people. We need to keep bringing in new people in order to sustain the group. And as I said, the group is important because that is how we establish a community, a safe space for humanists and other non-theists, is by having a group, by having a community. Even if they're not coming to meetings 100% of the time, the fact that they know that we exist, that we're there, and that they're members does a lot better for people than not having a group. And so I just kind of wanted to talk about that, about how we can sell humanism without appropriating religious people and how they do it, because a lot of times what they do is pretty shady. A lot of things that they do is pretty shady. And humanism is not like that at all.
For more information about the topics in this episode, including links used, please visit the episode page at glasscityhumanist.show.
There was something that caught my eye in the news around about the time that our previous episode had been published. So I didn't have a chance to talk about it in the previous episode. But one of the suburbs to the west of Toledo, Sylvania, like many school districts in our area, they've been having problems hiring bus drivers for the school year. Not sure, there's many different ideas about why that's a problem. Some people think it's because it's too regulated. Other people think that a lot of the people that were eligible to drive a bus might have perished during the pandemic. That's a possibility, because a lot of the bus drivers are retired or semi-retired, and that could be, who knows. Anyway, so they're having trouble getting bus drivers. And one of the ways that they tried to address the problem of not having enough bus drivers was to redo their bus routes, cut some routes and combine some routes so that they could stretch their drivers as far as they could and still get kids to school on time and correctly. So, it's about logistics. There's people that go to college about school transportation logistics. Anyway, so they came up with this plan, and according to state law, when they do a bus route plan, they have to present it before July the 1st to the parents. They just have to do that. It's a state law. Don't ask me why. The state laws are weird as it is. And so in April, they introduced this plan. And one of the changes was that some little kids, kindergartners, first, second, third graders, were going to get on a bus early in the morning, transported to one of the public high schools. There's 2 public high schools in Sylvania, to wait for another bus to transport them to their religious school. And 2 of the families of these younger kids did not like this new plan. They didn't believe, the initial reports was they didn't want their kid having to get on a bus at 6:15 in the morning and ride with teenagers to the high school. And I don't know what it is about little kids hanging out with teenagers. I mean, it's not, like I said, like I told somebody, I mean, they're not drinking and smoking and stuff on the bus. Anyway, so these parents of these school kids that were going to the Catholic school were upset about this plan, and they begged the school district to change it. They wanted to go back to the old plan, whatever the old plan was. And the school district said, we can't. We don't have the drivers. So the parents decided to file a lawsuit in Lucas County Common Pleas Court, local court, county court. When the parents filed their lawsuit in the county court, it had morphed into a First Amendment complaint. Their claim now is that the school changed the schedule for their kids because they were Catholic, and that this new bus plan would infringe on their ability to practice their religion. And so that's why they filed a lawsuit. They filed a First Amendment lawsuit. So they added on, they said, yes, the kids are getting up too early. They were riding with teenagers. Ew, ick, teenagers. And the school was doing this because they were Catholic. So it went to the county court, and the local judge, Stacy Cook, ruled in favor of the parents, but not for the First Amendment reasons. She, without evidence, without any testimony from experts, said, yes, 6:15 in the morning is too early for kindergartners, and yes, they shouldn't have to ride with teenagers. Ooh, ick. And so she ordered the school to go back and do a plan that would satisfy these parents. Or the judge said she would impose a plan. Okay. So they had until August the 26th. Well, I had seen this article in the Toledo Blade where the parents in the school district were meeting with a mediator. That's what in the legal process, that's what some parties do. They meet with a mediator, a third party. It's not associated with either of the parties that are squabbling. And what they try to do is they try to work out a plan satisfactory to both parties, and then they don't have to go to court. They don't have to have a trial, and then it gets settled. So they meet with a mediator, and the parents, their idea of how to satisfy their issue is for the school district to stop transporting high school kids altogether. And they said that will free up the bus drivers. Because according to state law, transporting high school kids, secondary kids, and junior high and high school is not required by state law. Transporting the little kids is required. Well, the school district's not going to do that. They're not going to stop transporting all high school kids just so that these two families don't have to ride a bus at 6:15 in the morning. So at that point, when I saw this article about mediating the dispute, I wrote a letter to the editor of the Blade. And one of the things I pointed out in the article, I talked about how the judge based her judgment on didn't base her judgment on information at the hearing or offer any evidence. It was just her gut feeling that little kids shouldn't be up that early and that riding with teenagers is awful. Anyway, but that's one part. The other part was I wanted to address the First Amendment violation that they claim. And the obvious point was that catching a bus at 6:15 in the morning doesn't keep the children from practicing their religion. They're still getting transported to their Catholic school. And then there was this little bit in the article, and I want to read this quote from the article, and I included it in my letter, that the district said previously the 3 Catholic schools were the only ones out of the 14 private schools that they bus that didn't have to ride with older students or have layovers at the public schools. And that the superintendent stated that doing so was necessary because those private elementary schools, unlike their public counterparts, held similar start times to the high school. So what this tells me is that these families that were sending their kids to these Catholic elementary schools were getting special treatment before. Because they had similar times, they were getting their own bus, their own separate bus to take them to school, because they were starting at about the same time that the high schools were starting. And so the plan the school was going to use before the lawsuit, the families would now be treated just like all the other private school and public school students. And that's how it should be. And it was just ridiculous. It's just, and what it is that these religious people, when they file these lawsuits, are claiming not a particular concrete injury, but like a feeling, like, oh no, they've made me feel bad. And it was kind of ironic because a lot of times that's what secular people, when they filed First Amendment lawsuits, when they were talking about 10 Commandment monuments on a courthouse lawn, that it made people feel like second-class citizens. And a lot of times the courts dismissed it. They dismissed the feeling of an injury. The way it's going now is that federal court, especially in federal court, is that if you're making a First Amendment claim, you actually have to prove that there was an injury. That means that the state forced you to pray or forced you to read a Bible or whatever. They're not going with a feeling or a concept that they're being discriminated against. You actually have to prove that they did discriminate against you. And so it amazes me that the families are doing this because being inconvenienced is not an injury. At least in my part, I'm not a legal person. But just being inconvenienced, having to have your kid get on a bus at 6:15 in the morning isn't a violation of church and state. Because in a lot of our Bill of Rights, like the First Amendment and the Second Amendment and so forth, that there are exceptions. They're not absolute rights. There are exceptions, like for First Amendment, time, manner, place. You don't have an absolute right to protest I don't know, the State House. You know, you have to get a permit, or there's a designated area that you can protest in, and if they tell you to leave, you have to leave, and things like that. And so these families claiming that they were singled out because they were Catholic is ludicrous on its face. Now, one of the things that they did offer up and I'll have a copy of their complaint, a link to the copy of their complaint posted on the show notes. What they said was that the director of transportation made a comment when they were thinking about doing this new plan, was they had come up with a list of talking points to tell parents about the new plan. And the director of transportation said, you know, make sure you point out to the public school parents that we're not going to have all the buses have K through 12. You know, all little kids weren't going to ride with teenagers. Just in this particular instance, because they were Catholic, because they were private school students that are starting at the same time, they're going to ride with teenagers. And the families in their complaint said this is obviously showing animosity towards religion. And it kind of reminded me of the Cake Baker Supreme Court decision, where the Supreme Court ruled that one of offhand comment made by one of the commissioners in Colorado showed a hostility towards religion, so they tainted the whole thing and threw it out. So that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to use any animosity towards religion as proof that they were singled out because they were religious. And they weren't singled out because they were religious. They were singled out because they were private school students. And they're being treated now like all the other private school students. So that's why it's ridiculous. So, you know, I'm thinking, you know, they're not going to reach an agreement, and the local judge is going to want to impose something, and somebody's going to appeal. Well, the school district kind of did a preemptive appeal, is they're going to appeal directly to a federal court. They're not even going to wait for Judge Cook to force them to do another plan. They're going to go to a federal court to try to get approval for their current plan, the plan that they want to do, which is unusual, because usually in these, especially when a school district is involved, the only time I've ever seen a school district run to a federal court on a First Amendment issue is when they're trying to be religious bigots and trying to force religion on kids. And they'll waste taxpayers' money because they've been told that what they want to do is illegal, but they'll still go through with a trial in federal court and then find out that what they did was illegal, and then they've wasted money. So I wanted to give you an update on this. This is an issue that I'm following. We have some members that live in that school district, and it's just, you know, and we could get into talking about, probably not in this episode, but later on in a future episode, we'll probably talk about a lot of the privileges that religious people enjoy in this country, simply because of the First Amendment. And having public school districts bus their kids to their private school is one of those privileges. And there's some people, some atheists and humanists, who oppose the spending of taxpayer dollars at all to benefit religious kids. And so maybe we'll talk about that in a future episode.
Thank you for listening. For information about the topics in this episode, please visit the episode page at glasscityhumanist.show. Glass City Humanist is an outreach of the Secular Humanists of Western Lake Erie and is supported in part by a grant by the American Humanist Association. The AHA can be reached at americanhumanist.org. Sholi can be reached at humanistswle.org. Glass City Humanist is hosted, written, and produced by Douglas Berger, and he is solely responsible for the content. Our theme music is Glass City Jam, composed using the Amplify Studio. See you next time.